After the Civil War, the bloodiest battle in the history of America, the broken bond between the Union is slowly being mended by a process called Reconstruction.
Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation so that his soldiers would have the will to fight, but the radical Republicans wanted a more permanent solution to the problem, so they passed the 13th Amendment to make all men free. Radical Republicans like Charles Sumner took a major part in our country's reconstructional phase. By expanding civil rights to African American citizens, they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which guaranteed equal accommodations in public places and prohibited courts from excluding blacks from juries, although it was poorly enforced.
During this phase, the Radical Republicans passed a bill which helped the black population receive education and proper accommodations for everyday life called the Freedmen's Bureau. By the time it was repealed, approximately 200,000 blacks were taught to read, along with 3,000 schools built. In the South's opinion, this was not acceptable, and they introduced the Black Codes, restricting freedmen's rights.
In my opinion, the worst part of the Reconstructional phase was definitely the Black Codes. The blacks were treated literally terrible. It was basically like taking slavery and changing the name. They were forced to sign contracts which were semi-bondage. They didn't let them vote by scaring them off with lynching, and they couldn't even rent land. I don't even know what I would do without my mansion or my custom-designed jail cell.
The 1876 election was very controversial and led into the Compromise of 1877.
1877 helped decide who would become president since both candidates did not receive enough votes. The Republicans were granted the victory of presidency but had to remove their troops from the South, ultimately ending the Reconstructional phase of America.
Because Southerners would not accommodate to the newly passed 13th Amendment, Radical Republicans passed the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed citizenship for everyone born in the U.S. and equal protection of all citizens. To further enforce the idea of black equality, they also passed the 15th Amendment in 1859, which prohibited states from denying any citizens to vote based on race, color, or servitude. Plessy versus Ferguson, it was ruled that separate but equal accommodations were legal, which caused Southerners to implement the Jim Crow laws. These laws allowed segregation to be more prominent.
An educated former slave, Booker T. Washington, had one of the most abstract points of view on the segregation policy between the blacks and whites, leading him to present the Atlanta Compromise.
In Booker T. Washington's Atlanta Compromise speech, he introduced his idea that respect and equality would be gained through economic progress. Not everyone believed in Washington's ideology. Some believed that blacks should automatically receive respect from whites, like W.E.B. Du Bois. Washington's idea was later praised by several important leaders, like President Theodore Roosevelt.
Theft, corruption, scandal, the introduction into America's Gilded Age.
The Gilded Age, which was given its name by Mark Twain, began when Ulysses S. Grant was elected as president. He was unfit to command an entire country, so he believed it would be a better idea to let his incompetent cabinet make decisions for him, which led America to be swallowed by corruption. The first serious scandal, which erupted in 1872, was Credit Mobilier. Union Pacific Railroad created Credit Mobilier. They hired themselves to build a railroad line. They paid themselves with inflated prices and bought the loyalty of congressmen, which protected their secrecy, because if a congressman exposed them, they would also expose themselves.
I don't know why everyone's so afraid of corruption. I mean, look how good my hair looks now. All because I was corrupted at a young age. I just want to party.
Corruption spread in the East while injustice spread in the West. People believed that they could help civilize the Native Americans, when in reality, they only disintegrated their culture.
When settlers first came to America, they brought many diseases such as smallpox and created poverty for the natives since they took their land. The Native American population declined to 200,000. But their torment did not stop there. They were also forced to become more civilized. Century Dishonor was a book published to unearth the horrors done to Native Americans. Contrary to popular belief, it took a negative effect to Native American culture. Native American children were taken to boarding schools such as Carlisle in Pennsylvania to become more civilized by getting formal education, training, and converse to the Christian faith.
I never meant to hurt the Native Americans. All I wanted to do was share the injustices done to them.
The introduction of the Dawes Act of 1887 furthered the destruction of tribal culture. It divided up the tribal lands into plots of 160 acres or less, and if the natives stayed on the land 25 years or more and adapted to the American way of life, would be granted U.S. citizenship. The act was ultimately a failure because the natives did not want to stay in one area for long. They wanted to follow their main source of food, bison.
It was so wrong that they were taking Native American culture and just pulverizing it when it was the Native Americans' land in the first place.
As America's population grew, people began migrating west but needed an efficient way of travel, so they created the Transcontinental Railroad, which was a major innovation for frontier life.
Railroads were a faster, cheaper, and more efficient way of transporting goods, livestock, and people across the country. Since more people could afford to move westward, they helped disintegrate the Native American population by taking their land and abusing natural resources.
Living in the West proved harder than anyone believed, causing the farmers to become self-reliant and create techniques and innovations to make prairie life easier. They adapted to their surroundings by dry farming and using irrigation. They created barbed wire, spurs, cedars, and tractors which innovated life on the frontier.
The innovative ideas of the farmers may have made life easier, but they destroyed the environment because they abused their natural resources.
The railroad was completed, the population in the West rose, causing overpopulation by homesteaders, farmers, miners, cattlemen, and natives. By 1890, the frontier was closed to settlement due to lack of open area. Responding to the close of the frontier, Frederick Jackson Turner wrote an essay called The Significance of the Frontier in American History. In his essay, Turner argued that the frontier experience took a fundamental role in shaping American society. His thesis explained that the experience promoted independence and individualism, which caused people to become more inventive and practical-minded. This is what helped the industrial period come about.